Good morning and welcome to the third glorious year of the Low Carbon Smart Mobility Technology Conference that the Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium, QTRIC, is proudly presenting before you today. Whether you are a newcomer to our conference or a returning attendee, you would have a lot of enriching and interesting sessions arranged for you in the 3 days that follow. Thank you so much for joining me here. My name is Parvati Pillai. I work as a program manager for ZEP Consulting Services and Business Development at QTRIC. I do want to thank our sponsors, ZEP Clean Power, for making this session possible. Thank you. And before we dive deeper into the panel presentation, I do have a note to share with our audience members here. Before we get started, as part of our commitment to gender parity in transit, we are running a national survey to assess gender disparity. In the Canadian transit industry, research clearly shows that there is a stark difference between the number of women in senior leadership positions compared to men. We know these disparities exist, but we are less clear on why these disparities continue to persist. At QTRIC, one of the ways in which we have committed to gender and racial equity has translated into a research partnership with the University of Windsor. This has allowed us to engage in learning more about the complexities of workplace environments. To increase the number of women in senior leadership positions, we need to understand the experiences of all individuals with different identities who are currently working in transit, so we can make informed recommendations to transit agencies about best practices, policy, and strategy. Today, we invite you to complete a short online survey to learn more about the social and organizational context that you work in. The survey is open to anyone in any role who works in the transit industry in Canada. It is anonymous. We do not ask for your name or your organization. We will be sharing back the findings of our research in the fall of 2021. If you have any questions about the survey or research, please contact the research team at the University of Windsor, who are listed in the survey link. The link has been pasted in the chat for you to complete at your convenience. Thank you. So with that, I do want to welcome our audience to the panel session for today, which is on battery electric bus transit operations, small to mid-sized systems. We are talking about bus range numbers ranging from 100 to 500. A little bit of a preface before we jump into our panelist presentations, which are, you are all excited for. I know that. So in terms of innovation, when we talk about the size of transit agencies, large size transit agencies may experience political issues or massive trans-regional transit systems have regional political issues to navigate when planning like electrification or innovation. Small to mid-sized transit agencies, in the context that we are talking about 100 to 500 buses, they are at the right size to be able to drive up innovation. And we are about to be hearing right from two leaders in this space today. I have the pleasure of inviting Mr. Scott Gilner, Senior Policy Advisor at Brampton Transit. Welcome, Scott. And Mr. Eric Morhaz, President at STL. So these are our two panelists. Thank you so much, Eric and Scott, for joining me here. We do have like a 10-minute short presentation from our panelists here, and after which we would go into the Q&A. Audience, as you listen to our panelists speak, please do type up your questions in the Q&A chat box, and we'll be sure to get to them as we enter the panel discussion. For now, I would like to turn to Scott and request your presentation. Over to you, Scott.
Great. Thank you, Parvati. And good morning, everyone. Thanks to QTRIC for the opportunity to share some of Brampton's plans towards fleet electrification. So I'm happy to be here and speak to you today. And certainly we'll try to get through this slide deck as quickly as possible to allow lots of time for some great questions coming in. So with that, we'll just jump into the agenda for this morning, and recognizing the limited time we have, I'll provide a little background on Brampton Transit's operating profile so you get a sense of who we are and what we do. And then spend most of my time on the exciting electrification projects underway and conclude with some key takeaways. There we go. And so in terms of Brampton Transit, we currently have a fleet of 473 buses. And obviously during the pre-COVID era in 2019, we operated 1.26 million revenue service hours, carrying over 31 million revenue passengers. We operate from 2 garages. We provide service from 4 transit terminals. We maintain over 2,600 bus stops and over 900 bus shelters. We have about 1,000 transit operators and 1,300 employees in total. And that kind of makes us a larger mid-sized system, and we're on the verge of growing into a smaller large size system. So we're growing in leaps and bounds, and happy to share some of that growth data with us in the next slide. So we're by far the fastest growing large transit system in Canada this decade, especially during pre-COVID, with ridership growing about 160% between 2009 2019. And this has been fueled by one of the highest population growth rates in Canada, as well as the introduction of our Zoom rapid transit service, which launched in 2010. And to keep pace with ridership demand, our service hours have almost doubled. Ridership was two and a half times higher, and rides per capita also doubled. And this slide just quickly represents our growth from 2009 through 2019, and the population growth increased ridership demand, and City Council provided support by increasing staffing levels and service hours required to sustain the expanded service delivery. So you can see our growth is being managed appropriately with service hours, staffing, and population supporting the overall ridership and population growth. The next table highlights some comparative ridership growth of transit agencies in Canada between 2009 and 2018. And some of these transit agencies are slightly smaller, some relatively the same size as Brampton Transit, and others larger. And it really just shows how much our growth has outpaced our peers, which is a good thing, but it can be a challenging thing as well, as we all know. So in terms of our fleet today, we have, as I mentioned, 473 buses. We don't operate any rail, so it's strictly bus service at this time on the conventional side. And we have 340 conventional clean biodiesel buses. About a third of our fleet, or 133, are Zoom rapid transit vehicles, which are diesel hybrid electric. And they deliver about 3,500 tons of CO2e of GHG reduction per year when compared to full diesel. And earlier this year, we added our first 8 battery electric zero tailpipe emission buses into the fleet, which I'll talk about in a few slides. So really, we've been fortunate. We've been leading, along with QTRIC, the Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium, to deliver the Pan-Canadian Battery Electric Bus Demonstration and Integration Trial, always a mouthful. But apart from the technology aspect of this project, one of the most unique elements of this project has been it's brought together many of the key government and private stakeholders, including multiple transit agencies, TransLink, YRT, and Brampton, competing bus manufacturers, Novabus and New Flyer, and charging system manufacturers, ABB and Siemens, all the academia that's supporting it, and support from our various electrical utilities as well. So it's really unique in this space, globally actually, and we've had a lot of global interest in this project for that very reason. And it's been an excellent project. It's making Canada the pioneer of high-powered, standardized, and fully interoperable opportunity on-road charging systems. So as I mentioned, on May 4th, we launched our eBus Phase 1 trial with 8 battery electric buses, 2 from Novabus and 6 from New Flyer, 213 kilowatt batteries on board for the New Flyer, and 76 kilowatt hour batteries on board for the Novabus, and 4 450 kilowatt high-powered standardized opportunity en route chargers, 1 from Siemens Canada Limited and 3 from ABB, all using the OpCharge protocol, now which would be replaced by J3105-1. The Pan-Canadian trial is the first time in the world where vehicles and chargers from different manufacturers can be used in a fully interoperable form, meaning they can plug and play into one another's charging infrastructure to gain a charge. And this is, obviously a huge benefit for the transit industry as a whole. With our council support, we're very proud that our deployment is currently the largest single global deployment of the standardized and fully interoperable BEVs and high-powered on-route charging systems to date. So now we'll just jump into a quick 45-second video I'd like to share with you all. And for those of you've already seen this, please bear with us in disregard, but never like to forego an opportunity to promote our great marketing team. So Parvati, if you could please play the video.
Scott, could I remind you to unmute yourself? You are still on mute.
There we go.
Thank you.
There we go. So next, I'll just touch on quickly on the policy landscape that's helping shape our pathway to full electrification. First, in 2019, as we all know by now, the Prime Minister of Canada issued a mandate to help school boards and municipalities purchase 5,000 zero-emission school and transit buses for the next 5 years. A very ambitious goal that we're proud to support. And as we move forward, starting in 2023, any federal funds used to purchase buses must be used to procure zero-emission buses. So currently, Brampton is working towards supporting those mandates. Next, the CIB released a growth plan in 2020, which is a $10 billion Canadian plan investing in 5 key areas. We heard from Minister McKenna about the exciting news, and we're just awaiting the intake and guidelines for the $2.75 billion earmarked for zero-emission buses, and we certainly plan to take advantage of that funding to help our electrification pathway. Slide. So our phase one.
Hi, Scott. Sorry. Just to remind you, like there is a little bit of muffling on your end. Can you readjust your audio?
Yeah, I can try.
Audio sounds a little bit muffled. Thank you.
Is that better?
That is a lot better. Thank you.
Okay, great. No problem. So our phase one trial will enable us to study the effectiveness of battery electric technology in our operating environment. Based on our operational needs in terms of our current route network and service design, we are anticipating a need for a combination of both battery electric and fuel cell buses in the future. Likely battery electric in the near future and fuel cell in the more distant future. In September 2020, Brampton City Council approved 2 key electrification studies required to support our transition. The first one, as Kelly mentioned, London's undertaking a similar study. Brampton is also undertaking a full network analysis, predictive techno-economic modeling study. It's being currently done by QTRIC in 2 phases. Phase 1 is just nearing completion. Phase 2 is slated to be completed by the end of this year, as it's has a bit of an FCM, Green Municipal Fund component to it as well. But essentially, it's a very detailed assessment, route by route, block by block, right down to the vehicle level. And the outcomes will tell us where, in terms of which routes and what, in terms of which propulsion technology we will need to look at for each route. And this study will help inform our rollout plan, which is really our next step. And so the second key study will be our sustainable fleet transition strategy and rollout plan. And this will be a competitive procurement consulting assignment, and it will identify, based on the QTRIC modeling, when in terms of the fleet year by year and how, including a funding and procurement plan, we will transition the fleet to electric. And certainly our goal is to beat our peers always. So we'll be looking to TTC and Ottawa in terms of electrification of the fleet on a per capita basis. And try to challenge them in that space. So stay tuned for that. Towards the end of this year, we should have a good announcement on that. Obviously, you've all heard already about our third facility, so I won't spend too much time on it, but to support our growth, we are currently planning the design of a brand new third transit facility. It'll be a 400,000 square foot facility and home to about 440 buses. Phase is being done in 2 phases, phase 1 and 2. Phase 1 construction has been confirmed through ISIP funding, investment of $175 million. And through phase 1, we're hoping to be able to construct the largest battery electric capable transit facility in Canada to date to help support a fully electric zero tailpipe emission bus fleet from this facility in the future. And we're currently engaging the federal government and senior levels of government in terms of funding this facility, because we believe it's an opportune time to do that, and it's a really unique situation for us to be in. So designing the third facility, I'm just going to skip over this. Designing the third facility, obviously it's going to lead to significant greenhouse gas reduction emission savings, estimated at about 97% annually, compared to operating a diesel bus fleet, and that's due primarily to the clean energy production in Ontario. There's many elements to consider as we go through meetings with our local power utilities, defining the type of charging infrastructure, and the infrastructure, to Kelly's earlier point today, is the bus side is fairly simplistic. Well, it's not simplistic, it's fairly stable. The infrastructure, depending on your operating facility needs, is a big question mark. And I think that's one that everybody kind of struggles with. So we'll touch on that later on. So in terms of planning for fleet-wide electrification, it's a complex process. We need to look at the predictive modeling that Qtric's completing for us and develop our rollout plan to ensure that we have a firm plan and set targets and that we're taking us in the right direction for Brampton. We need to look at evaluating our capital and operating budgets and repositioning them to consider alternative pathways to minimize the financial impacts, reviewing operational needs such as the need for increased spare ratios, increased revenue service hours to support an electric fleet, especially if we're doing en route charging. All the supporting infrastructure, the cost difference between the diesel and diesel electric hybrid buses and the fully electric buses, it's significant money when you start looking at our fleet. Currently 473 today, we're expected to grow close to 900 by 2031, so almost doubling of the fleet. And if you look at the gap pricing difference between diesel and electric, you're about 500,000 roughly per bus. So that adds up very quickly to significant investment requirements. For battery electric, obviously the power grids and requirements around that, and for fuel cell, the need for continuous supply of either preferably green or blue hydrogen, and the storage or production of that. So, and then comes all the things that we don't know today as we continue to learn and lead in this space. And to support our learning, we do go through continuous learning at Brampton Transit. The transit industry as a whole is continue to lean on and learn from each other, and we need to continue to do that. We have great supports in place through Qtric, and we also consult with other Canadian transit agencies who are in the process of trialing electric buses in various forms, pardon me. Some of them include quarterly meetings with TTC involving the leading transit agencies in North America that are electrifying their fleet. So, and more recently, the Canadian Qtric and Opta have developed the zero emission bus committees, and we participate on all of those as well to make sure we're getting our lessons learned. And my last slide for today is just some key takeaways. Through our various engagements, we've had the opportunity to learn, influence, and shape the transit electrification landscape. We've had tremendous support from our Mayor Patrick Brown and City Council, our CAO David Barrick, our GM Alex Milovich, and our entire cross-departmental senior leadership team has really supported our electrification pathway, and that's a key point. You need that senior level support in order for your trials and pathway to be successful. You need a strategy in place that is really supported top down and really need to consider scaling up resources proportionately as you go through a trial phase or a pilot phase into full implementation. We've identified the need for additional resources potentially as well to support this as we go full fleet. You need to identify your opportunities and limitations within your own organizations and address them prior to launching. And ideally, you need to ensure the funding and financing is in place to support your established vision, because without it, it becomes very problematic. And I think I've used the term before, trying to align the stars, and that's really what you're trying to do. Is you're trying to align your budgets to your fleet plan, to your service plan, to your revenue service hours, to the funding that's available to you, and make sure they all come together at the same time. And that's very challenging to do. And then lastly, procurement and contract admin, we found it to be very heavy. So you need to really establish key linkages internally and externally to help provide support. Once the contracts are inked and in place, it's very hard to change scope and switch gears. So spend the time up front and really develop those procurement documents based on what your needs are. And then also really consider placing strong emphasis and some concentrated efforts on the whole change management piece. And I can't underscore this enough. This has been a huge piece for us in terms of elements such as planning, scheduling, maintenance, operations, your unionized work rules, collective bargaining, budgets, all your relationships and interactions and how departments work with each other. It really does change as you begin to electrify your fleet and uncover some of these areas that you need to focus on. And then lastly, obviously training is a huge component from the maintenance operations, but also the planning and scheduling side as well. And I think that's it. So that concludes my presentation. I'll turn it back to Parvati, and please to answer any questions either now or offline. If anyone wishes to reach out to me directly after the conference, always happy to chat. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Scott. What a great presentation. You clearly articulated the point about how to become a leader and how to stay a leader. It is not easy to be one, but it is so rewarding. As you heard from Scott, continuous learning and learning from each other is critical. And that's exactly what we are doing right here. I do want to invite our next panelist, Mr. Eric Morhaz, for his presentation. Over to you, Eric. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Moras, and I'm pleased to be with you all today. I will give you a brief overview of the STL and an update on how much progress we have made in our electrification program. First of all, Laval is the third largest city in the province of Quebec and covers an area of over 265 square kilometers. The city's public transit agency, which is celebrating its 15th anniversary this year, endeavors to develop and offer an efficient public transit service that evolves based on mobility needs. Being able to adapt to the community and its need is one of our key strengths. Let me share a few examples with you. The STL is known for its innovation and its latest technology offering to its customers. Our electrification journey began in 2007 when the City of Laval assessed GHG emissions on its territory. It was no surprise that transportation accounted for a large share of these emissions. The STL therefore conducted studies to determine which modes and technology it's needed to adapt. In considering trolleybus, fast charging buses, and other options, it was the slow charging bus that won out as the best solution for Laval. After completing the pilot project with the design line bus from 2012 to 2015, we conduct a strategic study to confirm the data and prediction before preparing the call for proposal, which allowed us to acquire 10 electric buses. We received the first of the buses in 2019, and production of the buses was still underway with the pandemic struck. We experienced delays in delivery and testing, but we were able to complete them, so we could start putting the buses into service last month. Electrifying our bus fleet is the start of our agency's full transformation. To accommodate more electric buses in adapted facilities, we are planning to expand and convert our garage. At the same time, we are getting ready to upgrade and optimize all our operating system to improve our processes and efficiency. We cannot manage an electric bus like we cannot manage an electric bus like you do an electric car at home. It's far from a simple plug and drive situation. For required components, to maintenance operation facilities, and to charge management, we must make sure we understand the technologies and be able to integrate them. All this must be done while we maintain our regular operation. Our employees have shown dedication and determination in this process, which required them to adapt and undergo training. We are very proud to be the first public transit agency in the province of Quebec to pull long-range electric buses into service. Let's have a look at this video in French with English subtitles of the changes the STL is undergoing.
L'arrivée d'autobus 100% électriques à la STL apporte un nombre important de bénéfices pour tous, mais comporte également son lot de défis. Pendant que les Lavallois bénéficient d'un service sans ralentissement ni interruption, l'équipe de la STL redouble d'efforts afin de s'adapter au changement. Au cours des prochains mois, voire prochaines années, nous devrons adapter la planification de nos circuits, le stationnement des autobus, l'affectation des chauffeurs, les opérations d'entretien des véhicules et plus encore. La recharge d'autobus, c'est une nouveauté et nous sommes parmi les pionniers. Nos experts se consacrent à maîtriser cette innovation à son plein potentiel afin de respecter les heures de sortie des autobus et optimiser nos opérations. La gestion du système de recharge est un nouveau défi en logistique des transports. C'est pourquoi nous travaillons avec plusieurs partenaires, dont Hydro-Québec, afin d'obtenir le meilleur rendement éco-énergétique possible. Afin de faciliter pour tous la transition vers un réseau électrique, notre site web et l'application STL Synchro vous permettent de suivre votre autobus en temps réel et vous alertent en cas de détour. Ensemble, on carbure à l'énergie positive et on s'engage à rendre le transport en commun hors du commun.
As told you from the outset, innovation is in the STL's DNA. Electrification is therefore the natural course for us to satisfy government and environmental requirements while continuing to provide our customers with the latest technologies. The advantages are also shared by our team. For example, some trades had to adapt. Electric vehicles mechanic training is still not available in Quebec. Our employees therefore had to seek out knowledge and skills in electricity to adapt to their charging duties. In the fight against climate change, we don't have a spare planet. Fortunately, we do have alternative technologies that allows us to be a part of the solution. We are forging based on this belief. So thank you very much, and feel free if you have any question.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was a great presentation as well. And I completely see how you have painted the picture of electrification starting back in 2007 as well. A great story, great experience to share. Thank you so much to both of our panelists, Eric as well as Scott. Now we are entering our exciting panel discussion phase. We already have quite a number of questions from the audience, but I do want to start with the question that I am really eager to hear your insights on. So maybe I would start with you, Scott. You outlined like the planning, the immense planning that goes into actually planning, like implementing electrification, from feasibility assessment to rollout planning, implementation, analytics, everything. What is the number one benefit that you foresee that electrification can bring to Brampton Transit, particularly given your increase in ridership that you demonstrated as well? What is the number one benefit, or two, if you do want to add one more benefit that you see that electrification is bringing to Brampton?
Sure. That's a great question. I think there's a number of benefits, many benefits, in fact, to electrification. Everything from anticipated cost savings over diesel to a more peaceful ride for our customers and limited noise also externally. So, in neighborhood settings, you don't hear a noisy diesel bus rumbling down the road. It's almost like a stealth vehicle running down the road. You don't even hear it until it's upon you. But I think the number one benefit in my mind is the estimated emissions reductions, obviously. Reducing our GHG emissions to support the city's target reductions. So the City of Brampton set interim target reductions for GHGs formally to achieve a 20% reduction by 2024, and longer term targets to achieve GHG reductions of 30% and 80% by 2030 and 2050 to support the Paris targets as well. So I think doing the right thing from an environmental perspective is the number one benefit in my mind, not only for our generation but for future generations to come.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea, like, in terms of acting on the GHG emissions, foreseeing a future without emissions where it is all clean for us is one thing, but acting on it takes real leadership. So kudos to you. And of course, Eric, your story is very much similar as well, because you mentioned how in 2007 you were looking at your GHG emissions, and that was the starting point as well, if I understand correctly. Could you detail a little bit on how that strategic focus setting exercise happened at STL?
Okay, first of all, the GHG emission is an important part to our electrification plan. Like Scott said, it's the mainly factor that we move to electric buses, and we have the target to reduce the GHG emissions by 40% by 2028. It's a very fast target, and we are dedicated about that. and for that we are actually we will invest in our new electric facilities. By 2025, we will buy only electric buses, but it's great to invest, but we have also to invest in facilities. It's very important, and we have some challenges with the financing all of these investment, and it's a great objective, but we have to planify that very well. And actually, why we are using only 10, why we bought only 10 buses, because it's our existing garage is almost full of capacity, so we have issues. The easiest things to do in the electrification with an electrification plan is to buy buses. It's the easiest part of the electrification part. We have to invest in facilities. We have to retrofit our existing facilities, and also we have to manage, to planify like Scott said, the energy capacity, we have to manage with our in the province of Quebec with Hydro-Quebec, with our power provider. So we have to build many partnerships to concretize, to realize this plan. And but it's a great plan. It's a great plan. It's a great plan for our user experience with less noisy buses. It's a great plan for our OPEX and operating expenses because we decrease the maintenance costs. But we have to do that for the planet. See, for the environment, we have goals to decrease our GHG emission, and it's the first objective and for our electric plan.
That's great to hear, and thank you for enabling me to have the segue to ask Scott this question on the challenges, because as Eric was talking about how the plan is important for the planet, for our future, and I think, Scott, your point is also very well in alignment. We know when how rewarding it is at the end of the day. But when the buses are out on the road, you benefit from the OPEX savings, as Eric mentioned. You have like the GHG emission reductions that you're attaining. However, it doesn't come without challenges, and particularly when a transit agency in this current era of electrification, when they go electric, and you have been in planning with the QTRIC project for a few years as well, there are a lot of challenges that you need to transcend, and there are a lot of partnerships that you need to establish as well. Would I be able to ask you, Scott, like, could you shed some light on that, partnerships and challenges?
So I think, obviously the challenges, I kind of hit on this earlier in the presentation, but aligning the stars is a huge challenge. I mean, you're dealing with, multi-million-dollar investments in terms of funding or financing. You're dealing with a lot of, political support, but also political influence and desire to, progress the transition to electrification quickly. And that's not something that you can do easily or quickly. So I think partnerships are key, and learning from each other. As I mentioned, we wouldn't be able to be where we are today without the continued learnings and sharing of information with our transit agency partners, with QTRIC. We've all brought each other to where we are today, and we're going to take each other to the future. And if anybody thinks they can do it on their own, they're sadly mistaken. I think going on your own it would be a huge challenge and a big risk. I think gaining the benefit of lessons learned from others is how you improve your own operations and your own deployments. And in terms of the planning piece, as I mentioned, I've been personally involved in this since 2014, working with QTRIC in detail since 2015. We're now in 2021. And we just launched our first 8 buses a few months earlier this in May. So you can see how long it actually takes, but I think others that are coming on board now are going to gain the benefit of those lessons learned and be able to adopt quicker. I think certainly the investments of senior levels of government, the passion that Minister McKenna speaks to in terms of fleet electrification and the funding that the federal government has provided and the financing opportunities through CIB, I think those are all necessary things in order to further our journey along the electrification pathway. But really taking the time to plan out your strategy and understand, through lessons learned, through a trial or a pilot, I don't think going with 30 or 50 buses off the hop is going to get you the lessons that you need to learn to adapt and better be able to grow the system as you electrify it. So I think we're actually, although it's taken us a lot of time to get where we are today, I think we're in a very good spot. We're currently undertaking our network-wide electrification planning. We're going to be doing our sustainable fleet plan and rollout strategy. And based on those 2 studies, we'll have our clear direction and pathway forward. And from there, we can start tackling the tough issues of financing and funding. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so I think our audience are very interested to know about what your leadership has enabled you to accomplish. So you have painted that picture about where you are currently and what the challenges that you transcended are. Currently, as of today, do you have any resistances in moving forward, and how are you planning to navigate them? Do you have any immediate resistances or issues in that domain of operating the BEPS, because you already have 8 of them out?
I don't think we have any resistance. I think we have tremendous support actually from our mayor, from our council. That's been quite clear in all the recent approvals. Both in terms of scope and funding for electrification efforts, but also for generally our environmental sustainability practices. We've got community energy and emissions reduction plan recently approved by council last fall. We have a refreshed environmental master plan. We have a council emergency climate declaration. We have fairly aggressive GHG reduction targets to help support the Paris Accord. So I think in terms of resistance, no. I think in terms of challenges, yes. There's some challenges on the funding and financing spectrum in terms of being able to finance our wishes. As I mentioned, our fleet's going to grow to almost double by 2031, 2035 timeframe. And so, making smart investments today for future technology tomorrow, we're going to have to live with these buses for 18-year bus life. So buying buses today, we're stuck with them for 18 years until we can replace them. So I think, having that support in place is critical, but the financing, equation of it is tough. I think the infrastructure side of it is tough, especially when you're looking at retrofitting existing facilities to support electrification. You have to look at the grid capacity coming into the site. You've got to look at potentially upgrading power, new substations, smart charging, energy storage, microgrid, solar, PV. So there's a ton of stuff that transit agencies typically don't deal with. We run buses and we do that well. And, today it's fairly easy. You get your diesel fuel deliveries and you fuel your buses and you run them. Transit systems of tomorrow, when we electrify, you're talking, very complex electrical, mechanical systems that, not all transit agencies have the staff on board to be able to manage those types of systems. So I think, those lessons learned as we grow are critical. But I think the funding, financing, the infrastructure side of the equation are really where our challenges lie. And that's really going to dictate how quickly we can actually transition to full fleet.
Right. That's great to hear. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's a collaborated effort, right, that brings us the results. And I think you hit the nail right on the head there with the fact that you are not experiencing resistances. You are having challenges that is posed by a change, and change management is something that we all need to go through. Now, I do want to turn to you, Eric, because one point that Scott raised is very interesting for us to discuss here. you are transit agencies, you are small to mid-sized transit agencies, you know what you do very well in terms of operating the buses, and you have your staff, your mechanics, your electricians, your staff are trained to operate at the diesel fleet or the fossil fuel powered fleet. When you plan the transition to electricity, like electrified transportation, what were the training gaps that you had identified, and what did you do about them? Eric, if I may turn to you for some insights from your side, from STL.
Yes, it's important. The training, the transition for about training, it's a very important part of the electrification part. It's a challenge. It's an important part, and it's for what also we bought only 10 buses. It's to prepare this big plan to buy electric buses only by 2025. Okay, it's a transition. We made a lot of studies. We made a lot of we cut this electrification plan with the different system and different parts, and the training is very important to be prepared, and the transitions can be too much high because we have to manage. We have to have change management. We have also to prepare our mechanicians. We have to prepare our staff to manage. We have the maintenance to manage. We have also the charging to manage also. Okay, the charging is a big part. The charging management is a big part of our electrification operation, and we have to keep in mind that we have to. It's like a work in progress. We have to develop RT systems to manage and we have in our plan it's to manage a little float in the first step, to prepare, to analyze, to test, and after we will have all the data, and the change management will be there to launch our big electrification plan in 2025. It's important to keep in mind that it's important to have different steps for the electrification plan deployment.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, and I particularly appreciate how you said you do not do like a full system overhaul, buying like the entire fleet of electric buses. You started with 10, and I do want to turn to you, Scott, because I do have some audience questions about scoping that project. So from a project manager's perspective, when you look at it, what is that criteria, that magic criteria, if you have one, that you adopted to select the right size, the right number of buses to deploy in a pilot study or in a demonstration trial? What was your criteria?
So obviously, in Brampton's case, we chose opportunity charging, largely because during the initial planning stages with Qtrick, we identified some limitations with the current capacity on depot charged buses. So when you look at your route structure and route network, for example, our Route 501 Zoom travels from Bramley Terminal out to York University and then back. It's about a 60-kilometer round trip. And when you do the math, you start talking about, potentially a 300-kilometer capacity. Then you're talking, basically 5 or 6 trips before that bus has to come back to the depot to fully charge again for 3 to 5 hours. So for us, that just wasn't sustainable. And at the time, TTC was also embarking on their pilot study or trial. And their focus was in depot charging. So we made the conscious decision to go with opportunity charging, largely in part based on the modeling that Qtrick had done for us on the 2 routes that we've initially launched. but also the partnership and support that we had from the federal government in terms of funding phase one of our study. So our phase one study is about a $16 million project, and over $11 million of that is being funded by the federal government. So that's really tremendous support from the federal government, and their investment into this project has allowed us to explore opportunity charging on the scale that we've been able to do that.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, clearly, you have articulated how it was all planned out from step one to wherever it is right now, and it is a planning in progress as well. It's an evolution, right? Thank you, Scott, for sharing that. And I do want to pick a point that you highlighted about predictive modeling or feasibility assessment, because that was what you did in deciding whether or not depot charging would be sufficient, or you need to go the opportunity charging route, which you did. Eric, if I may turn to you, what has been your experience with the feasibility assessment, and how did you plan your electrification with the feasibility assessment prior to that?
Can you repeat the question, because the sound cut?
Sorry about that. So I was asking about feasibility assessment or predictive performance modeling, which you may have done before you bought your buses and deployed them. You may have predicted what the performance would be like through feasibility studies. And I was asking what was your experience and how did it merit you to do electrification using a feasibility study results?
Yes, the studies was very important to identify our needs. Okay, like Scott said, we have different. Each bus network have some particularities and challenges, and actually we and our studies. We made some studies to identify exactly what are our needs, and our needs actually for the city of Laval is to have slow charging in overnight in the garage systems, and it's important to know about that, to study that, to implement the good solution for our needs, and it's important to test it, and we test it a lot, and we are actually ready to deploy our first 10 buses fleet with slow charging technology.
Mm-hmm. That is great to hear. So, in terms of electrification planning, I do want to turn to you, Scott, because when you integrated these battery electric buses to your fleet, it is not as simple as Eric previously pointed out as well. Buying buses is the easier part of the puzzle. Making them part of your family is the troubled part, right? So, how did you prepare your facility? Like, what were the kind of infrastructural modifications or facility retrofits or anything of that sort that you had to do to enable these assets to be joined as a part of your fleet or integrated well?
Yeah, but first of all, okay, excuse me, Scott, can you go first?
Oh, you go ahead, Eric.
Yes, correct. Okay. Okay, our existing facilities cannot charge more than 3 or 5 buses at the same time, actually. So it's a challenge, and it's also for what we bought only 10 buses because the electric capacity of our installation, our facilities are not in the. It's a challenge, actually, and we are actually discussing with Hydro-Quebec for energy providing, and it's a challenge because our new facilities will have electric capacity comparing about 4 belt center. Our big arena for the Montreal Canadian. It's comparing to 4 belt center for electric needs for our new facilities. So it's a big challenge. But we have also partnership with Hydro-Quebec to realize that. It's important. It's a large part because our power providers is it's the biggest partner for the to provide the energy, and it's we are actually to realize them, and we are actually planning for our new facilities.
Thank you, Eric. And I do want to turn to you, Scott, as well, because it's an important topic that you may want to share your insights on as well for facility modifications and retrofits.
Yeah, I mean, we're supporting our initial eBus launch out of our Sandalwood Transit facility. It's an existing facility, obviously, so we had to look at retrofitting. At that facility, we have installed a Siemens 450 kilowatt overhead opportunity charger. As well, we've installed some Clipper Creek J1772 in depot chargers for our Nova fleet. We've got 2 of those as plugins, and then we also have a charge point charger, a dual port charge point charger to charge our New Flyer fleet. So we did install a host of different technology at the site, but the biggest challenge we ran into was trying to locate the overhead opportunity charger. Ideally, we would have liked to have had this positioned or installed inside the facility, but just based on our internal circulation and some constraints within the existing site, combined with some limitations around the roof supporting structure, we weren't able to do that. So we did look at an exterior location, and if you're ever in Brampton, feel free to drive up to our Sandalwood facility. You'll see the charger front and center. It's kind of on the southeast corner of the property, right there for everyone to see as they drive by. So they can it's a good promotional tool for us. But we had some challenges getting electrical service to that location. There were some existing civil works and duct channels running underneath the maintenance apron that we had to go underneath, and so there was a bunch of civil construction constraints that we were dealing with, and so we did hire a consultant to do some mechanical, electrical, civil engineering for us, and through Siemens, it was a turnkey installation, so we worked very well with the Siemens team in identifying these challenges and opportunities for different approaches, and we ultimately, I believe there was 4 or 5 different potential locations we could have selected, and we selected one that had the most benefit and the least cost impact. We're quite happy with the installation, but based on the infrastructure that we've now installed there, we have completely maxed out the service capacity for that building. And so if we want to add one more charger, we're looking at probably, up, I guess, to retrofit the entire facility to serve that fleet, it'll be probably a 10 megawatt substation. And, you're talking estimated cost of $1 million per megawatt. So you're about $20 million investment just for the substation alone. So we're likely going to do our upgrade in 2 phases. Our next kind of leap into eBus will be eBus phase 2, which is probably 10 to 30 buses. So we're probably looking at a 10 megawatt substation as a phase 1 at the Sandalwood facility, which will allow us to grow probably upwards of about 100 electric buses. And beyond that, we'll have to look at a phase 2 substation upgrade to bring us to 20 megawatts. So again, really kind of looking at the modeling. You don't want to oversize the substation because you end up paying for electricity, that you have to have dedicated that you're not going to be using, and that'll end up costing big dollars down the road. So, right sizing the electrification components to the fleet is quite important, and that's something that we're looking at in terms of our retrofits.
I think you explained, the whole story behind going to facility adjustments or modifications in preparing for a fleet transition very clearly. Thank you so much, Scott. I think that is a point that we need to be cognizant of when we are planning a transition. It may be that you need to actually invest in a new facility and retrofit the existing ones substantially to allow for successful integration. So thank you so much. We have a couple couple more minutes left in the session, so I do want to turn to both of you as leaders in the space. You have shown the world what is capable to be done with like a small to mid-sized transit agency, less than 500 buses. So I do want to turn to each of you for like a piece of advice that you may want to give fellow transit agency colleagues who may be listening to us here, as to what is the most important thing in planning a fleet transition to zero emission. Maybe I would start with you, Eric, there, for that one piece of advice that you would give fellow transit agencies who are planning electrification, how to do it right. Eric, are you able to hear me?
Okay, I can go first. It's important to to build a step-by-step plan. Okay, it's important to go with based on several studies with different partnership. It's important to build bridges between different partners, and it's important to share the information, to share the other experiences. We are all in the same situation, and we have to share the information. It's important to share the experience made by others because it's like a work in progress process. We don't have all answer to our questions, but we are still all in the same situation. So we need to share experiences to build an electrification plan. And this event is very important to discover information, discover experiences, and to share experiences also. Mm-hmm. It's a very good start.
Thank you so much, Eric. I think the goal is to care, to share, right? That is your advice to our transit agency colleagues, and I think that is very valid. We are not playing this game alone. We are all in this together, and you explained it clearly when you said it is always a work in progress. It's a leadership pathway that we are all in together. Thank you so much. Now I do want to turn to you, Scott, for your advice to our transit colleagues.
Yeah, I know we're running short on time, so I couldn't agree with Eric more. I think he hit the nail on the head with everything he said. Partnerships are key. The only thing I'd like to add to that would be not only partnerships amongst the transit industry and the transit agencies specifically, but also involving your OEM partners. So, in the case of our phase 1 trial, we've been fortunate enough to work with dedicated and highly responsive OEMs in New Flyer and Novabus and ABB and Siemens, and we all are working together. It's a competitive environment, obviously, on the bus side and the charger side, but we have really collaborated well with each other, and everybody has. And I think that's important in order for you to understand, sure, you get the funding today and you place an order for electric buses tomorrow, but realistically, what are the OEMs able to deliver? Is it a 12-month horizon? Is it a 15-month horizon? What are some of the technology challenges? Seek their advice in terms of what's good for your system, what might not be suitable for your system, and really understand that they're building these buses from scratch. They've got a supply chain that they have to adjust, and they continue to be very responsive and helpful to transit agencies as we move forward in this. So, involving the OEMs in the discussion early on is important to understand what they can and can't provide, and being realistic. And, one of the areas that we've been kind of struggling with is the whole term of zero emission bus, right? And I know our council has been very clear that they expect zero emission to be zero emission, not zero tailpipe emission. So they've even gone so far to say that manufacturing of the components that go into the bus should be zero emission. Mm-hmm. So looking at it from that perspective, the bus as a whole should be zero emission. Today we're running diesel-fired auxiliary heaters because we have to, based on the technology and the cold climate, especially in Ontario and in Quebec. So with our 8 e-buses, we are running diesel-fired auxiliary heaters. on both our Novas and our Flyers. And ultimately, the day will come where our spec will say no diesel-fired heaters. It should be all electric and purely a zero-emission bus.
For sure. I think, the pathway is clear. Our goals and vision is there. We just need to act together. And I think our panelists painted the picture insightfully here about how the collaboration, how the cooperation should work, not just between transit agencies, but allied partners as well, including manufacturers. I do want to thank you, Eric and Scott, for, such a great panel presentation, a great discussion. I hope I was able to answer some of our audience questions, if not all. But thank you so much once again for joining us here at the third Low Carbon Smart Mobility Conference. Thank you to our dear audience for tuning in. We have a lot of other sessions lined up for the day today as well as for tomorrow and the day after. Please do stay tuned. Until the time we meet next, it's a bye from me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.